Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com with some dire warnings about the climate. CBS News is reporting this. Last summer, Russia reached 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit, the highest temperature ever measured within the Arctic Circle, according to an annual climate report released Wednesday by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. With help from a record-breaking concentration of carbon dioxide on the planet, the Arctic surface air temperature broke a 121-year record in 2020. Today, scientists sounded the alarm on the climate crisis again. Representative Eddie Bernice Johnson, chair of the House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology, said in a statement regarding the report, "It's clear that without swift action, we can unfortunately expect to set new records like this every year." The 31st Annual State of the Climate Report, published by the American Meteorological Society and led by the NOAA, is based on work from over 530 scientists in more than 60 different countries. Wow, if 530 scientists in more than 60 different countries said something, it must be true. Well, there's just one minor problem. What they're saying simply isn't true. The official Alaska maximum temperature record of 100 degrees Fahrenheit was set on June 27, 1915 at Fort Yukon. And Fort Yukon is north of the Arctic Circle. So the record was actually set more than 100 years ago when carbon dioxide levels were much lower. How is it that the 530 scientists who wrote the report weren't aware of this very fundamental fact? In the November 1922 edition of National Geographic, the leading Arctic expert at the time, Stephenson, wrote about the 100-degree temperature north of the Arctic Circle in Alaska. Stephenson worked very hard to educate the public about how hot the Arctic could get during summer. Stephenson blasts theory of eternal cold, 100 degrees in shade in Arctic Circle sometimes. April 30th, 1937, a hot story from the Arctic. According to Stephenson, a noted Arctic explorer, our conception of the frigid north and the sizzling equator is all wrong. The Arctic Circle is not the coldest part of the world and the tropical zone is not the hottest part, he said. Meteorological records reveal that both the hottest spot and the coldest spot are in the so-called temperate zone. Of the several weather stations along the Amazon River, which nearly follows the equator, only one has ever recorded a temperature of as much as 100 degrees in the shade, while the weather stations on the Yukon River in the Arctic have reported temperatures of more than 100 in the shade. Stephenson was making the point that during summer, the Arctic can be hotter than the equator. But for some reason, 530 scientists from more than 60 different countries were unaware of fundamental information about the Arctic climate. In 1927, a group of motorists tried to drive to the Arctic Circle through Belgium, Holland, Germany, Denmark, Lapland, and Finland. But they were thwarted by temperatures continuously over 90 degrees Fahrenheit, massive forest fires, and melting permafrost. The hot temperatures in the Arctic shouldn't come as a surprise. At the end of June, the North Pole receives more solar energy than any place else in the world. Now let's look at the claims that the Arctic is record hot and melting down. According to the Danish Meteorological Institute, temperatures at the North Pole were below normal almost every day this summer. Not surprisingly, Arctic sea ice is melting very slowly this summer, and the extent is up about 20% from last year. Ice coverage during the last half of August averaged about 6 million square kilometers, which is about the same as it was in the mid-1950s. This graph of Arctic sea ice cover since 1925 was the gold standard and was used in the 1985 DOE report. There's plenty of corroborating evidence for Vinokov's graph. This month in 1958, a U.S. submarine surfaced at the North Pole. The New York Times reported that the ice was melting very quickly and predicted the Arctic would be ice-free sometime during the next generation. They wrote, "Although the idea that a solid ice sheet covers the central Arctic has lingered stubbornly in the popular fancy, the northern cap of ice worn by our planet is actually a thin crust on the whole, only about 7 feet thick." And if we look at yesterday's data, we can see that the ice in the Arctic is still about 2 meters thick, just like it was in 1958. We've already seen that the extent hasn't changed since 1958, and now we can also see that the thickness is the same as 1958 as well. I wonder why 530 scientists from more than 60 different countries were unaware of these basic facts about the Arctic. NASA's James Hansen started the global warming scare before Congress in 1988. He predicted that the area around Antarctica would be the fastest warming place on Earth, and he also predicted that peak sea ice loss would occur around Antarctica as well. But he got everything exactly backwards. Antarctic sea ice extent is near a record high. My beautiful wife Kyrie published this data of Antarctic sea ice extent from the Japanese Meteorological Agency. Antarctic sea ice has been increasing for more than 40 years, which is the exact opposite of what Hansen predicted. Hansen predicted that this place right here would be the fastest warming place on Earth, but recently it's been the most anomalously cold. In 2004, NASA's head of climate Gavin Schmidt wrote, "During recent decades, surface temperatures decreased significantly over most of Antarctica." And in 2005, NASA published this map showing how rapidly Antarctica was cooling. But the cooling didn't suit NASA's political agenda, so 2 years later they changed the data to turn cooling into warming. And then in 2009 they changed the data again to make Antarctica really hot. Antarctic sea ice, which is near record high, doesn't lie, but NASA climate scientists do. There's a lot of sea ice in the Arctic now, but around the time Stonehenge was built there probably wasn't any. July temperatures along the northern coastline of Russia may have been 2.5 to 7 degrees Celsius warmer than they are now. 5,000 years ago, trees grew all the way to the edge of the Arctic Ocean in what is now permafrost. The nearest living trees now are about 100 kilometers further south. Carbon dioxide levels were much lower 5,000 years ago when the Arctic was much warmer, so it's pretty clear that carbon dioxide does not control Arctic temperatures. I wonder why 530 scientists from more than 60 different countries were unaware of these basic facts about climate science. They claim that their fake record temperatures are becoming more and more common, but the data shows the exact opposite. Most U.S. state record high temperatures were set more than 85 years ago. Record highs have become much less common. But the biggest farce of all is pretending that Western governments can control the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Ever since Al Gore became vice president 30 years ago, we've had one scam governmental climate agreement after another, and none of them have accomplished anything. Alexander Solzhenitsyn said, "We know they're lying, they know they're lying, they know that we know they're lying, yet they continue to lie." That was true in the Soviet Union 45 years ago, and it's still true in the United States now. Toto has been pulling back the curtain on this scam for the past 13 years. You can visit him, Kyrie, and Caesar on the web at realclimatescience.com.